The Miami Dolphins, as a franchise, are in a very interesting position. Uh, they've got a lot of stars, a lot of questions, and not a lot of overall talent. A lot of big names and a lot of players who flat out can't play. So today we are going to talk about what the Dolphins should do this offseason. Starting off, we're going to talk about the draft, and we're going to talk about cap and all the ways they can increase their cap space, moves they need to make in free agency, moves they maybe should look into making if not this year, in the future. And then to end the video, we're going to talk about their schedule and predict what their record will be. You ready? Let's get it. So the Dolphins have the 13th overall pick in this year's draft. And in my mock draft, I have them taking Malachi Starks. He is a safety from the University of Georgia. Georgia drafting Georgia players tends to work well. We've seen that from the Eagles. So I have the Dolphins doing this. Reasoning, the Dolphins have already said that they are going to move on from safety Javon Holland, and I really, really, really hope they don't bring back uh, Jordan Poyer because he was god awful this season. So Malachi Starks will be your replacement safety for the two that they are losing, and that leaves the offensive line as the big focus to once you fill the safety hole. Those are the two big holes. Offensive line, they really only have one high caliber offensive lineman, and he's got one, if that season's left in the tank, in Teron Armstead. So with their second pick, round two pick 48, I have the Dolphins drafting Donovan Jackson, an interior offensive lineman from the Ohio State University. There's a lot of guys in this position that they could draft, but it's important to get, they need an interior offensive lineman more than a tackle. So that's why I have them picking Starks instead of a tackle higher. But then I have them picking a tackle with their third pick in the draft, round three, pick 98, and then taking Anthony Belton, an offensive tackle from NC State. So this is really your major three needs, kind of in order, I would say, at the start of the draft. They do have a decent offensive tackle, Patrick Paul, on the roster, who's like a work in progress. They drafted him in the second round last year out of Houston. So the plan is for him to take over Tron Armstead, but I'm pretty sure three of their offensive linemen are free agents, and bringing back any of them really isn't too highly recommended. And not only have they not been good, they haven't really been available, which is kind of the big issue for the Dolphins in general. And then so their fourth pick, this is kind of where you kind of just got to take best available. In this spot, I have them taking Barrett Carter, a linebacker out of Clemson. Of course, I got to get a Clemson player in there. But no, it just kind of worked out this way. He was around. He's kind of like top 90 on the big board, and this is, pick 114. He was able to fall in this mock draft I did. And then this kind of this point on, I was just drafting best available. That's really what you got to do later in drafts and hope one of these guys just, goes crazy and becomes the, sixth round pick that turns into a three-time All-Pro, that type of thing. So to finish out the draft here, we have round four, pick 134, Jared Wilson, another interior offensive lineman from Georgia. Then we have round five, pick 150, Darian Strong, cornerback from Virginia Tech. Corners are always, in need of depth. In the round five, pick 156, we have Antoine Powell Ryland, an edge also from Virginia Tech. And then round seven, Dolphins have three seventh round picks here. We're taking Howard Cross the third from Notre Dame, Jimmy Horn, the receiver from Colorado, and Jackson Hawes, tight end from Georgia Tech. So plan for the draft is you need a safety and you need an offensive lineman. After that, it really, whatever you need. Some things we tried to do was draft Jalen Milrow, but we're gonna take the guys we need first. So really, I think round three would be the earliest I would consider taking Milrow, and I don't really see him falling that far, although he is starting to fall with his Senior Bowl performance. But he's the type of guy that I think will have a really good combine and then, move back up to a late first, mid second round type pick. And teams always reach for quarterbacks. So I really don't see Milrow falling to where makes logical sense for the Dolphins to waste that high of a pick on him. Also, I would draft Kelvin Banks, the tackle from Texas, but it doesn't seem like he will be available at pick 13. If he is, I would take him over Malachi Starks. And I also consider trading back into the first in that mid 20 range if either Josh Simmons, Armand Membao, or Tyler Booker starts falling. Those are all like the second wave of linemen that Donovan Jackson, the guy that I did draft in this mock, and Anthony Belton, they're like later in this second wave. But there's like really two clear-cut number one guys that probably won't be there, Will Johnson and Kelvin Banks, that won't be there Um, at pick 13 for the Dolphins, but if either of those guys are available, I would do that and just work on getting a safety with the, third or fourth round, maybe second round pick. And then Nick Manawari from South Carolina or Xavier Watts would be the type of guys that be available in the second and third round as a safety. So really, those are the two ways you can either go safety first and then offensive lineman, or you can go O-line first and then safety. I think the safety first is more reasonable the way drafts tend to play out with offensive linemen don't really fall. And pick 13 is probably, I think, to draft one of these other offensive linemen at pick 13, it'd be, too much of a reach when you do also have a desperate need at safety. But yeah, I think that's the overall draft for the Dolphins, prioritizing safety and offensive linemen. Got to protect Tua. And as of right now, they have zero safety depth. So those are the moves you got to make. Anything to add, Connor?
No, I mean you pretty much went as far into detail as you could on the draft, so I don't have any outside opinions on it.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of guys in this draft I like. I think Howard Cross in round 7 would be an absolute steal. Thought he was pretty good for Notre Dame.
Yeah. I don't know if Xavier Watts will fall the second or third. He'll probably fall to the second, but I don't know about the
Yeah, that
third.
was my backup. He was in the I think he was like low 80s on the big boards.
Yeah, he's a little bit lower because of his size, but he's
Yeah.
a good safety. He's not like Kyle Hamilton, but he's still a good player.
Yep. All right, and then moving into the cap situation and free agency. As of right now, the Dolphins have 1.5 million in cap space. Obviously, this is going to change. They already cut Raheem Mostert, Kendall Fuller, and Durham Smythe on Valentine's Day. So nice gift there from the Dolphins to those guys. That created around 8 million. And to get them up to the 1.5 they have right now, the biggest thing they could do would be to restructure Tua's contract, which is and most likely going to happen. This would generate about 20 million in space. And then they could, if they released Bradley Chubb post the June 1st designation, that would save them 19.6 million. I think they should do this. This is kind of what I'm going to get into later. And that would bring them up to the number that we're going to roll with, which would be 44.7 million in cap space going into free agency. If they do keep Bradley Chubb, that put you around right around 25 million, which is still a decent amount they could get things done with, but they do happen to have a good amount of depth at the edge and outside linebacker position. So really, Bradley Chubb he was out all year with the ACL tear. So you didn't they didn't miss the playoffs because Bradley Chubb wasn't there. There has been rumors about them trading for Myles Garrett. It doesn't make sense to me. They should just get rid of Bradley Chubb. I don't really think anybody's going to trade for him, paying him that much money when it does seem likely the Dolphins will cut him and you could just get him without giving him a pick. But if you could get a fifth round pick for him, I'd do that immediately and get his money off the books to have money going to free agency. They need to extend Jalen Phillips, so that will technically count as a free agent move. He's much better than Chubb. And I shouldn't say much better, but much younger, and he should be cheaper with an extension. And the way contract situations and cap hits in the NFL work, you could sign him and save money the way cap math works. So that could get you, extra like 3 to 5 million, I believe, depending on how the contract and the signing bonus works. So if they do that, maybe you could get a little more in cap, but we're just gonna roll with the 44.7. Um, but the big thing is if you move on from Bradley Chubb, that kind of sets the direction to where you move off the star players and you start to work on building an overall good team. I feel like the Eagles model of success is what the Dolphins should run with. I guess the Lions model would be similar, where it's more of not so much star heavy and having guys that are making, the huge bucks like the $20 million contracts, because that's a lot, NFL money compared to NBA money. But like guys like Teron Armstead, um, Bradley Chubb, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Ramsey. You don't need that. You need an overall collective team. Like I said, the way the Lions and the Eagles have done it, because you don't have the superstar quarterback, but you have a quarterback that is plenty of serviceable when healthy, of course, to take you to the playoffs and superstar. Like he's not going to be, Josh Allen and Lamar, but you could build the team and have a proper team that can beat these other teams that you're competing against and work on just the overall pieces, to dominate the way we saw the Eagles do this playoffs with the edges. So with Chop Robinson, who was really a surprise they picked him in the first round with the edge depth they had. And then Jalen Phillips, those will be your main edges. And then have them drafting the Antoine Randall from Virginia Tech. So that'd be your edge depth. Bradley Chubb is just not needed, so you cut him, save the money, and move into free agency. And then continuing with the getting rid of the old, we have Teron Armstead. Keep him for one more year. Like I said, they got Patrick Paul to take his place next year. We also drafted another offensive tackle in the third round in this mock draft. The big need is guard. They're losing both guards in free agency, or at least they should lose them. They could resign them, but they should lose them because they're garbage. Liam Eichenberg was a joke the past 4 years, I think it's been. He's Notre Dame guy. He's god awful. Um, and so I want to sign one starting guard and have the rookies, and I believe we have another like third round pick from 2 years ago still on the roster. Have those dudes compete. We had a fourth round offensive lineman, interior offensive lineman, and our second round pick interior offensive lineman. They can one of those guys will work out good enough to make it through the season and sign a starting guard as the big piece from free agency. I know nothing flashy. It's the Dolphins. They don't need anything flashy. We know all the flashy pieces on their roster. So you sign someone. The guy I'm going after is James Daniels. He's 27 years old. He's been on the Steelers. Just had a 3-year deal with the Steelers. I would sign him to another 3-year deal. He was 3 years, 8 million. Reports are saying he's close to doubling his contract in this free agency bubble. So I'm thinking 3 years, 15 million with a $3 million bonus. That seems reasonable. Seems like something you would sign. Can live in Miami. I'm sure that's a much better life than Pittsburgh in the winter. And so that'd be about an $18 million cap hit is what I'm budgeting for that. Said give him 26.7 million left. And from there, all you really got to do is sign a competent backup quarterback. Tua's injuries basically derailed the season 2 years now of the really 4 years he's been around, not counting the first year. So like I said, I wanted to draft Milrow, but if Milrow is not available, we're not going to reach for Jalen Milrow. He's not, we're not going to reach for a backup quarterback. That's just ridiculous. So the ideal quarterbacks I would go after would be Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, or Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo knows the system, worked with McDaniel, so that'd be probably your cheapest option. And then Zach Wilson and Trey Lance are at least guys with a sliver of, turning out to be better than what we know them as right now. And obviously, the plan is for them never to see the field. Tua stays healthy all year. But having a guy like Wilson and Lance, I believe, might have overlapped McDaniel. At least Shanahan has a similar system. But those guys have, a sliver of potential to where if Tua goes down and this dude comes in and lights the world on fire, then it's like, yo, maybe we got to get rid of Tua. And then you have a starting quarterback for very cheap if that goes away. So I'm budgeting 6 to 10 million for these guys. Quarterbacks aren't cheap. I believe it was Drew Lock was getting 10 million from the Giants last year, and we know what Drew Lock is. So, but I don't think they'll have to spend that much for these guys. That's why, like, they're the low end of the backups available. This year is a good quarterback free agency with Darnold and Fields and stuff. So these guys are definitely going to be the cheaper options. Definitely not expecting to start, which is what we want. But I think if they do have to start with time in the system as a like planning to be the backup, they'll be able to do well. We even saw Tyler Huntley be, somewhat all right once he got time to learn the system. But you definitely have to have a backup quarterback ready to go throughout the offseason and not just pull a guy um, from the street to try to save the season when, Tua gets hurt because it's basically a coin flip. The way it works is this year should be the Tua's healthy year because it seems to be every other thing that they've had going on the past couple of years. And then the only other thing for free agency, we want to re-sign Tyrell Dodson, Benito Jones, and Jeff Wilson as starters and depth pieces. And with the remaining money left, probably about 10 million, maybe a little less after we sign those guys, you need another tackle for a depth piece, another interior defensive lineman for a depth piece, another corner and receiver. Those obviously you could get minimums from, undrafted free agents in that realm, veteran minimum, stuff like that. So to recap, free agency, we want to start moving away from the old stars, bring in another interior offensive lineman, have the rookies work with them to, start next to him alongside Teron Armstead, be ready to move on from Teron Armstead after, and just kind of sure up the rest of it and have a backup quarterback plan actually in place instead of something you throw together mid-season when you need it to save the season.
Yeah, I like
I think
that.
that
I like that approach.
go
I
ahead.
feel like making big splash plays is not necessary, especially for the Dolphins. So I like that you didn't have there's no massive signings. It's just filling in the holes and basically strengthening the depth of the roster and
Yeah.
filling in areas where in the past few seasons it's been an issue like quarterback. Um, and then, like that's kind of how I think a lot of people should approach it with that. You're not necessarily saving money, you're still spending money, but you're just spreading the money out instead of using all the money that you have on one splash piece that's not going to contribute in the way you need it to. So you have a good distribution of these funds. I feel like that makes it so that you get basically the best bang for your buck when you consider what you're actually spending in the offseason, and you even get a little bit left over.
Yeah, you got to find guys like Zach Bond, like the Eagles did, who's basically a special teams guy, and they turn him into an all-pro player. If you're gonna win, you got to have guys that aren't supposed to be good that end up being great. It's just the way, like the Patriots did that for years. The Chiefs pulled Tyreek Hill out of nowhere. It's the stuff like that that allows you to be good. So you're not gonna have the quarterback out of nowhere like we saw the Niners do for a couple years. So you got to find it in other pieces, and if you're spending unnecessary amounts of money on one guy. Like you spend a ton on Teron Armstead because your line's bad, but he's just one of the five. It's not gonna help you get one corner because your secondary is bad and Jalen Ramsey. It doesn't make the corner unit good just because you have one shutdown corner. So they gotta start thinking smarter instead of building a football team like you would on Madden by the big names. So, and then potential trades, I don't really have any for the Dolphins. You could maybe trade Bradley Chubb, like I said, if there's any asking for him. I don't really see it because he's probably like the third guy. Because I think, well, Miles Garrett obviously number one, and then rumors some Max Crosby potentially being traded. Rumors be behind those two guys as far as trading for an elite defensive player. You could potentially trade for a backup quarterback if the asking price for the guys I mentioned is maybe higher than expected. But that's really it. Bleacher Report had an article saying Teron Armstead for Joe Thuney, the tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. I would do that immediately if I was the Dolphins. I don't see why the Chiefs would do it. Um, Giving up a young player for a player that was 2 years max left in his career. But if they're going to ask us to do that, I'd do it kind of like the Luka Doncic trade. Lakers didn't offer it, but you're not saying no to that. And if that's going to go through, then maybe you could find one for Jalen Ramsey, where you're swapping an old player to a contending team for a young guy that you can get uh, more quality years out of. So basically, any trades and I guess the free agency moves like we talked about would just be moving the Dolphins' window of success to further along to go with Tua's contract instead of going with the window of Tyreek Hill. Like if Tyreek, I would trade Tyreek too, but the problem is he's a diva, and I don't know how much value you're going to get for him. So you kind of just got to let his contract expire and say, "Good career. We appreciated while you were here," and be, you know, respectable about it, I guess. Um, but that's really all I have for the Dolphins. I don't have them making major moves. We're not going to ship off Tyreek for something crazy. But if something crazy happens, I could definitely see it. The Dolphins have done dumb stuff like that in the past. But I think it's time for them to, stop being flashy, and be smart about it and really, go about building a team like a normal front office and not like a 14-year-old having fun on a video game. Because that's what it used to be, the way they brought in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey and Teron Armstead and Bradley Chubb, where they're just, oh, flashy name, I'm getting that, instead of building an overall team. But let's go through their 2025 schedule. So obviously they have home and away games with the Bills, Patriots, and Jets, and the remaining home games are the Ravens, Bengals, Chargers, Commanders, and then their away games, along with the AFC East, are the Browns, Steelers, Colts, Falcons, and Panthers. In my opinion, a pretty light schedule, I would say.
Yeah, that's a very light schedule in my opinion. I think the Bengals will be better next year, but and maybe the Chargers, although I'm not too high on them, but the Saints Buccaneers is super easy. Colts are not that great. Falcons and Panthers are also not good. So, um, and the Browns and the Jets.
Yeah, you got the NFC South. Yeah. NFC South as the division from now your conference that they play, and AFC North as the division in conference that you play. And then Chargers and Colts, I believe, we're playing them based on where you finished in the division. And Commanders, second place team in the NFC that you play. So some tough games in there. I think the Commanders and the Ravens, outside of obviously the Bills games, would be the toughest. The Dolphins tend to struggle with mobile quarterbacks in my fan experience. I think they can beat the Bengals. That should be a game they take personally, in my opinion, because last time they played the Bengals on Thursday night in 2022, that was the infamous Tua concussion game. So if they have any heart, they would take that game seriously, but we've seen the way they show up in the playoffs, they don't have any heart. Um, but I think they should go 4-2 against teams in the AFC East. They should beat the Jets twice because I think they're entering a total rebuild. Should probably beat the Patriots twice, but could potentially lose one to them because I think they'll be better. And then if you lose one of them, you got to work harder to split it against the Bills. But it's more likely that they sweep the Jets and Patriots and get beat twice by the Bills. That's just the way the Dolphin seasons have gone. So 4-2 so far. We can count it that way. And then AFC North, you should probably split those 2-2. Should realistically beat the Browns, at least the Browns. Steelers and Bengals, I think, are both, 50-50 games. We don't necessarily know what the Steelers are going to be, but that game's on the road, and then the Bengals, that game's at home, so should be able to win the home game. If not, you have to beat the Steelers, and then the Ravens count as a loss. They kind of always give the Dolphins trouble, it seems like. And then random one-off home game with the Chargers. I think they can win that one. They've tend to have the Chargers number. I believe Tua is 2-0 against Herbert in his career. And then Saints and Buccaneers. Those are the home games from the NFC South. It should go, if not better, in my opinion, against the NFC South. The hardest game is either the Bucks at home or the Falcons on the road. Falcons could be decent. Bucks are like a well-known middle of the pack team that seems to be every year. Commanders at home will be a fun game. I hope that's a primetime game because that's an exciting matchup that I feel like we haven't seen that matchup be good since the Super Bowls of 72. Um, but that should be good with the rise that Commanders have been on. Probably lose that one if the Commanders are as good as they were last year, but maybe they pull it off. I don't know. If they're over 500 at the time, they'll lose. If they're under, the Dolphins will win. And then Colts should be able to beat the Colts on the road. Who knows what the Colts are doing with Anthony Richardson and all that. That'll be a fun offseason outlook to talk about. So doing the math, I think 11-6 would be my prediction. Could see him being 12 and I really even see him being 13 and 4 if things go really well, but could also see him being 10-7 and needing luck to get into the wild card like they did this year. What do you think?
No, I agree with that. What you said about their overall record, I think 11-6 is very safe when it comes to picking their record. They have a lot of easy, um, they have a lot of
Yeah,
easy games, but they also have quite a few difficult games. There's really no in between for them. They got, the Bills are going to be tough games. I think the Patriots are honestly going to be pretty good next year. Not elite, but I think they'll give
yeah,
the Dolphins a run for their money. The Jets are the Jets.
definitely.
And then you have the Browns, Bengals, Colts, Falcons, Panthers, Saints. Those are going to be, the
They
Bengals
should
maybe
be
not.
wins.
They should be very winnable games. And the other ones are kind of toss-ups. So you have a few games that are, if you don't win, then you've got issues. You've got a few games that you're not expected to win, and then
Yeah,
there's a couple
that's
toss-ups in there. So I like 11-6.
yeah. I could see 11-6, and there's nothing really that happened that's surprising. Like with their season this year, they weren't supposed to lose to the Titans. They're not supposed to lose to the Jets at the end of the year. They're not supposed to lose to the Colts, but they're also not supposed to not have their $25 million quarterback. So that's just the way it goes. The trend is every other year Tua plays most of the games. So hopefully that's the case this year and they can get themselves back into the playoffs. Tua's made the playoffs twice being the starter, but he's only played in one playoff game. So hoping to see him get back there as a fan. And I feel like most people as fans of football should overall because it was kind of scary what we've seen him go through health wise. So it'd be nice to see him have success and that's not even the Dolphin fan in me. That's just nice to see a guy with health struggles succeed. Um, but yeah, they are kind of a wild card because of Tua's health. But even if they have a backup quarterback, like if they had Zach Wilson starting games for them and he knew the system and Devon Achane's healthy and Tyreek and Jalen Waddle are still there, they could beat the Falcons, the Panthers, the Colts, the Saints, the Jets, the Patriots. Like they can hang with those teams even without Tua. So there's really no excuse for them to make the playoffs this year. They go 8-9 again, it'll be a much different conversation when we talk about their offseason outlook next year. it'll be get rid of everybody. So this is really like we're at the point if the Dolphins don't have at least a playoff appearance, you got to look at Chris Greer, general manager, and say you got to go. You got to look at Mike McDaniel and say you got to go, and you got to look at Tua and be like, Son's got to change. We can't get rid of you because we just gave you a contract, but we need more out of you. So um, it's almost kind of a make or break year for the Dolphins, I'd say.
Definitely a make or break year for the Dolphins. I think with the way that this season ended, it kind of I don't think McDaniels is on the hot seat, but it's one of those things where like the eyes are starting to turn towards the Dolphins.
Yeah,
Everybody's like, okay, you guys lit up the world, like not lit up the world, but you guys were kind of you were there and you were relevant a season ago, a couple seasons, like the last few seasons, and then we've seen a bit of a step back, and obviously
yeah,
Tua has a lot to do with that, and the health of other people on the team, but this season, I think, is major for the future of the Dolphins. I think if this season's a struggle, if you guys don't make the playoffs, if you struggle, injury or not, I think you'll run into issues next offseason with a complete flip upside down of everybody in that building, and it's going to start with the
yeah.
head coach for sure. Um, I
Yeah,
don't
head
think
coach and
he's
GM
at
go together is
yeah,
the
exactly.
scene.
I don't think he's at risk of losing anything during the
Yeah.
season if
The
everything.
seat's not hot, but it's not cold.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Like he's not comfortable. There was some murmuring at the end of last season that maybe he's not the coach that we thought he was, when he was, the center of attention. I'm not saying he's bad. I like
they have the same. Yeah, they have the same struggles that they had the start of his coaching career. And it's like, my guy, we got to see some sort of progression. You
yeah,
still
exactly.
can't win games in the cold. Still can't beat teams over 500. It's like we gotta. We took some steps. You got Tua to be a good quarterback. We need to take another step and start and beat the Bills, win the division for once, something like that. So
Yeah, no, some
we'll
things need to
see.
be done. I think the Dolphins really need to like be to kind of overcome these stigmas about them. Like they need to, win games against good teams. I'm not saying that they have to go 2-0 against the Bills or beat the Ravens, but I'm saying like if they play the Buccaneers and the Buccaneers are over 500 and the Chargers are over 500 and the Steelers are over 500, they need to win those games. They need to if they're playing, I don't know
Yeah,
when they're going to be playing who, but if they're playing, the Bills in Buffalo late in the year, if they're playing the Steelers in Pittsburgh late in the year, they need to win those games when it's cold, like
yeah.
because
Make a
that's the
statement.
whole talk, like it's they're good against the teams that aren't good, and they're dog shit in the games when it's not comfortable for them, and then in the playoffs, forget about it. So they need to get past that and kind of take that next step this year. Otherwise, like you said, I think there's going to be a little bit of something stirred up in the within the front office and inside the building in the offseason.
Yep. They definitely an interesting year for the Dolphins this year. That's all we got for the Dolphins. Let us know what teams you want to see us talk about next. We're gonna do all of them, so we'll get to your favorite team eventually. But let us know what you want to see, and maybe we'll move the schedule around to get you your favorite team faster.